Serious dear teachers of Reddit, what was the creepiest thing one of your students did? English teacher in Japan here. I was talking to one of my girls who was always a practical joker. I asked her about her mother, and she said my mother is in heaven. I started to say oh my god, I'm sorry, and whatnot, and she stopped me, laughing, and said lol joke lol. I got you lol. Serious, my mother is in hell. She laughed. I hesitantly laughed. Then she started waving goodbye to the ground. I thought she had such a weird sense of humor. Yep, found out her mother really died a few months earlier. Still a great student. She's going to a nice engineering school now. Happy ending? I had a student who was a hoarder. He was one of those kids that we all remember who had the backpack that was filled with everything for every class. It looked like this kid carried around a small grocery cart on his back. One day, I'm walking him to his locker to look for an assignment that I knew that I had given him before, and I smell this nasty smell. Big surprise, it's his locker. Open it to find 89 cartons of chocolate milk stacked inside. That's not all on the floor. He had a pretty large mason jar filled with what looked like dead bugs. I asked him why he had so much milk in his locker, and he said stone-faced to dip the bugs in. Never sure what happened to this kid when he left, but that was the most disturbing for me. Had a student last year that was different. He didn't get along with other kids and kept mostly to himself. We communicated well when he was in the mood to interact. One day, at dismissal, I walked my students to their buses, and he suddenly stopped and yelled, "It's going to be so funny when that baby dies." It creeped me the fuck out, but I asked him, "Sweetheart, what are you talking about?" And he responded, "That baby in your family." I put him on his bus and let him go home. The next morning, I got a call at work from my sister telling me that she had had a miscarriage. I don't talk about my family in detail to my students, and I know I never mentioned my sister or her baby to that student. Maybe it was just a weird coincidence, but it still gives me the heebie-jeebies when I think about it. Looked me in the eye and said, "I'm going to come back to this school when I'm big and shoot everyone in our class." He was 4. This weird uncomfortable feeling just darted through me, and I had to step out in the hall. My heart felt like it dropped to the floor. I work with autistic 3rd graders. Couple weeks ago had a kid that was in the middle of meltdown. Screaming, crying, rolling around on a mat. All of a sudden he stops, sits up, points to the corner of the ceiling and says, "It's hiding in the classroom." Then rolled back over and laid completely still. Just a tad unsettling. I teach English in Japan. The day before I was due to fly home to have bone surgery, a student who rarely tries to speak English to me came to me out of nowhere. With no expression, she walked up to me and said in perfect English, "You are going to die." Then walked away. Fucked me right up. When discussing what students want to do during their summer breaks, a student spent a good 15 minutes telling us how he would like to go into the woods with a friend on a really long hike until the other person was totally turned around and lost, and then walk away, leaving them. He then detailed the many terrible things that could happen to his friend if he did so. It was brutal, detailed, and thoroughly planned. I'm not the primary teacher, just a support teacher, so I defer to the primary teacher most of the time. This was one of the few times I felt so uncomfortable with what was going on that I put an end to it first. I'm not sure if she just wasn't listening after having heard 12 other students talk, or if she was stunned into silence. This year I am teaching 8th grade, and I have a student who likes to masturbate in class. He is notorious for this. He wears silky athletic shorts and inevitably pops a huge boner and just strokes it in class. I had been warned that this was an issue at the beginning of the year by his former teachers, but he had been to counseling and forced to wear only long pants to school from now on, so I didn't think about it until one day he was propped against his desk right next to mine, since he also liked to make animal noises and mess with the other kids, and I look over and notice his hand is in his pocket, and yup, sure enough, that's an active boner right there. I'm in the middle of talking about gerunds or something, and he is literally staring at me and rubbing himself. It was the most uncomfortable moment maybe ever. For me. Not him. He didn't seem fazed at all. He never even broke eye contact. I got a text from a student saying he wanted to molest me. That was fun. Then again, English is his second language, and he meant bother. After telling him the second meaning, he would occasionally grab my arm in the hallway and rub it, saying molest, molest, molest. He did it when we had some bigwig government types visiting the school, and that did not go over well. I was a classroom assistant in a special needs school for kids with severe learning disabilities. Loved that job, was so rewarding and fun, and every day was different, until one day this kid came up to me, we'll call him Rob, who was undiagnosed autistic. His parents claimed he was just slow, but all the staff agreed that Rob was autistic. Now Rob was 15. I had never worked with him or his classes. I mainly was a carer for a young girl in first year. Anyway, Rob comes up to me and stands about 5 feet away and just looks me dead in the eyes at lunch. I'm standing trying to keep track of 15 to 30 kids on the playground, but he's just staring at me for about 5 minutes, thinking maybe he needed the loo or something, and was shy. I asked was he okay. He just screamed at the top of his lungs, "She's sick. She's sick. Your mommy is sick. She's sick." The kid had tears in his eyes, and his class carer came running to see what was wrong and escorted him inside. He just kept screaming, "Your mom is sick." I put it down to him just being a little wired that day in lunch, and me being a new face in the school and a 6'5" dude. To boot, maybe he was intimidated. He was then off sick for a few days and left our school a little over a week later, right around the time my mom was diagnosed with breast and ovarian cancer. Needless to say, I was freaked the fuck out. Forgot all about it until right now. Thanks Reddit. I was a kindergarten supervisor, which meant I took a class of kinders to recess, lunch, and rest time. I had one student whose mom had already passed away, repeatedly drew and played the creepiest story about a dad killing a mom and threatening to kill the little boy if he didn't stop crying. I reported this and finally did some digging. The boy's mom passed in a car accident. I have no idea what that other stuff was about. I also had the misfortune of seeing my neighbor commit suicide in front of me. The first day his son returned to school, he sought me out. He asked if I knew what happened to his dad. I froze because I didn't want to start crying or let him know I saw what happened. He cocks his head to the side, smiles, and says, "Isn't it great?" I get goosebumps just remembering. I used to work with a 3rd grader that would claim to see Chucky from the movie Child's Play sitting on top of the shelves in our classroom. He would then run out of the classroom and climb trees, bathroom stalls, basically anything his little wiry frame could scale. Turns out he had some severe mental problems, and his grandparents couldn't always fill his medications on time. He was on some powerful antipsychotics, which required them to frequently visit the doctor for refills. It was strange to have such a young child with delusions. 7th grade girls are the world's best detectives. They accurately called a teacher on being pregnant months before she would have started showing. How'd they deduce it? She was holding her belly and smiling while talking to the principal. They saw her not drinking at an after-mass fundraising dinner. Catholic school, the street. Joseph's Feast spaghetti dinner always has a cash bar with donated wine and beers. Money all goes to the scholarship fund. She started eating healthier. They actually went out and bought a really cute Build-A-Bear for the teacher. It was sweet. I'm a student teacher / tutor at a smaller school. I'm relatively young in age compared to my students, so there's an interesting friendship level of camaraderie between them and me. I have a student who, in the first week of me teaching there, found me on Instagram and proceeded to try and hold conversations with me and slowly work in relevant information from my Instagram. I didn't catch on for about 2 weeks when I was perusing through my account, which I haven't been active in about a year, and noticed that much of my conversation with this particular student crops up in my page. Proceeded to make my account private. Next day at school, "Hey Mr. Clever _username, what are we supposed to talk about now?" I'm a grad student. I had a student in one of my discussion sections, very smart guy, ex-military, about 10 years older than the rest of the class. This is a freshman level class, so he's also older than me. He was always the one to participate most in discussion, always playing devil's advocate, in a good way, basically the perfect student. Only bad thing, he had a habit of putting his pocket knife on the table and stroking it during class. He tended to sit within a couple of seats of me, so this was more than a little unsettling. After the third time, I had to ask the professor to tell him to stop bringing his knife to class because I was worried I might trigger something and get stabbed if I asked him myself. 27-year-old ex-military guy versus 22-year-old female. Not a fight I wanted to be in. I don't teach anymore, but when I did, 2 years, I regularly had students look me up on social media. I was the young teacher, and I spent a lot of time with kids in small groups. Being new got me slapped with a bunch of volunteer duties for homework help and lunch detention. I was pretty confident that my settings were private enough, and that I never gave anything away about my personal life despite a constant barrage of questions. In fact, it became a running gag with a few students who would incessantly pester me with questions hoping to get some small detail about my life. Near the end of my second year, I had my car broken into while it was parked in my driveway at home. Nothing of value was stolen besides a really nice supersonic snapback that I kept in the car. The next Monday I went into school and there was one of my homework help kids wearing the snapback. It turns out he had gotten an older friend with a car to follow me home after I left school and later that night broke into my car, took the hat, and, though I didn't know it at the time, spent about an hour sneaking around and looking through the windows at my girlfriend and I having a very boring Friday night. Charges were filed, and the kid got suspended and transferred to another school, but I moved out of that house as soon as the lease ended and stopped teaching, for other reasons, not just this one. Less than a year later, a student once got angry and told me she was going to cut my eyes out with a shaver. It was the use of the word shaver that creeped me out, because if she'd been copying the phrase from somewhere, which would have been bad enough, she would known the correct word, but nope. She thought of that sentence all on her own. I told a student not to crotch bump his friend. He started rubbing my back, said don't worry miss, you'll never see me again soon. Then he turned away from me and said to another student I'm going to get my dick hard and slap her with it. He then looked at me and said, what's wrong miss? Are you flustered? He's 18 years old. I told admin, and every witness denied it happened, so he didn't get expelled. I gave my notice the next day. I'm done. 2 years ago I got a kid mid-year, no big deal. His grades come in, and it turns out he's been juvenile lockup, and are coming from their alternate education program. Okay, that's a new one, but I'm sure he's okay now. Guy comes in with a shaved head that looks like a pumpkin and those tired eyes that come with a sleepless night. Okay, kind of odd, but let's see how he does. He comes in on a lab day and joins a group of some one-ape gangsters who don't really do anything, but by the end of the lab, they've not only done the lab, but were quiet and collaborative the entire time. This kid is a motivator. He's great. The next day, they had another lab and the kids it's with the same group. Alright, they are going to work today. 5 minutes after the warm-up is on screen, one of the boys comes to me and asks if he could be moved to another lab group. I ask him what's wrong and say they did a great job last time. He lowers his voice and the tough guy persona drops and I see a scared little boy. That new kid is a legit demon and the other guys want away from him too. I'm a little concerned, but I can't move them anywhere else since it's a full house that day, so I apologize and tell them to try to get to know him, and I'll be close the whole time. Fast forward a week and this kid is known school-wide now, and even the real gang members avoid him. It turns out he was in juvie for setting fire to his family's apartment that spread and killed his elderly neighbor. There was also evidence of him torturing animals, and he's been abusive to his mom and little brother. Being 13 he can't go to real jail, so he went for the maximum time in juvie, 2 years, and was released on parole. Apparently as part of it, he couldn't be around fire. Difficult considering that's what they were working with a lot at the time of year in chemistry. Anyway, on top of freaking the kids out, he would often make advances on the female teachers and follow them to their cars. He even jerked off in one of their classes while looking right at them. He turned his attention on me when I nudged him to wake up in class and told him to get off his phone. This guy followed me to my car every day for a week and would leave threatening notes and obscene pictures on my windows after I got there in the morning. The admin didn't do shit in all this urban Title I high school, so eventually all of his teachers got together, held a parent conference, wrote up a complaint to the school board detailing the problem, the steps we took to try to fix it and get help, our lack of support, and came to the principal saying that she either get rid of him or we send this to the board. It took another week of dealing with this guy before they caught him trying to bring a knife into school, and that was grounds to suspend him for a few days. When he came back, he tried it again, but this time tried pulling it out and threatening one of the security guys to let him in. His ass got tased and arrested, and we all were glad when he didn't come back. Last I heard, he was somewhere in West Texas. His mom was still under his thumb and his little brother had been in the hospital twice for bumps and bruises.